So this year marks a very unusual 30th anniversary for a film. And this film became infamous due to the fact that a lot of people look at it as the film that nearly tanked an up-and-coming young career in Hollywood. And for a while, this actress had to take low-key roles, and if not, just basically semi-retire, step away from acting for a while due to the controversy, but they would come in once in a while to take on a role with different shows. Sometimes the show would actually fit, what they wanted, to, kind of move on from what they were known for previously. The actress I'm talking about is Elizabeth Berkley. I think that's who it is, Elizabeth Berkley. And she basically was known at that time for her iconic role in the Saturday morning kids live action kids teen show Saved by the Bell. And she was known for her iconic role of Jessie, Jessie Spano. That's what it is, Jessie Spano. She was known for that role. And basically, the reason basically she had to kind of lay low a little bit after this movie was mainly, again, like I said, it nearly tanked her career. It nearly caused her career to go, in the toilet. And the movie I'm talking about since then has gained a cult following, and by association has gained her a bit of a fan following, more so than I think she expected on a positive side of things. And that movie is Showgirls. Now, Showgirls was actually, from what I knew at the time, was the first NC-17 film to get publicly promoted for a worldwide, nationwide release. And the reason for this is because it didn't just star Elizabeth Berkley in the main role, in the main lead role, if you will, of the film, but it also starred Kyle MacLachlan, I think that's his name, who also previously, ironically, starred as the villainous Cliff in the live-action Flintstones movie the year prior. So basically, it had some decent names in there and up-and-coming names. But why was this movie so controversial to the point that it nearly tanked, Elizabeth's career, and maybe by association some other careers, not to the point that they were almost over, but it was hard for them to get work afterwards? Well, mainly it's due to the fact that this film, in the eyes of a lot of folks, was nothing more than a big budgeted, basically a big budgeted $1 million budgeted, erotic porno film. That's all it was. That's all it really was. It was nothing more than a multi-billion-dollar or multi-million-dollar big budget, erotic porno film. That's all it was. And, because people looked at it this way, instead of looking at, at another way, basically as, let's look at the story, and what it's about, which a lot of people have been doing now lately over the past 30 years, if not 20 years. They've been now looking at it more so as a story, for the story instead of what's seen in there. The reason people would describe it as that is mainly because of a lot of the explicit scenes in the film. Not just, the infamous pool scene with Elizabeth and Kyle, basically, getting it on in the pool with Elizabeth basically, having, champagne poured on her by Kyle and then, kissing him and then giving him this seductive look before going underwater, submerging underwater and giving him, giving him a good time down below and everything before moments later, they're both kind of, just rocking each other's world, if you will. But it's also infamous for the fact that, you had, even at that time, a lesbian scene, two women, kissing and kind of having a little bit of a semi-lesbian, erotic scene or sex scene, whatever you want to call it. But also, it basically took an actress in Elizabeth who was known as, iconically as Jessie, in Saved by the Bell, and basically portrayed her as someone that was being corrupted by wanting fame, by, wanting to be the best, and was willing to do whatever it took in the story to do it, even if it meant injuring and ending another showgirl's career. And there is that scene where she's basically spilling out these, like, little beads and all that, onto the stage, and it's causing basically her main rival in the film to slip and break her leg. And only after that does she realize, wait a minute, only after that, I should say, does she realize that what she did was wrong. Because it takes a bit, but she realizes, she just screwed up, mainly because she was so obsessed and she was allowing herself to be manipulated by Kyle's character, who, just like in the Flintstones movie, if you will, which was a family-friendly film, was playing a manipulative antagonist here, a self-centered, manipulative antagonist. And yeah, it was just one of those films, basically, at the end of the day, where people felt like, Elizabeth did not have to degrade herself to this. Kyle didn't have to degrade himself to this. Nobody in that film, either up and coming or semi-established, did not have to degrade themselves to this. A lot of people felt, and whether they came out and said it in their own way, a lot of people felt that if they wanted to do this film, in the way that they did, they might as well have just signed a deal with Cinemax or HBO late night or Showtime late night and say, here, here's such and such amount of dollars, make a movie based on the Showgirls in Las Vegas and present it as one of your Skin Max or late night after hour movies. That's how a lot of people felt about it at that time. And some people still kind of do, but that's how a lot of people at that time felt. Like that's that's the place it should have been in. Now, the reason I know about this, of course, is, being a teenager, I was curious. I was curious about it, and I was also watching Saved by the Bell. So when I saw that Jesse Spano was in this film, I'm like, well, this is interesting. I got to check this out. And again, what I saw overall, when I saw this film, I'm like, okay, that was something. That was something to see. But again, it was basically, in the eyes of a lot of folks, nothing more than a multi-million-dollar, big-budgeted erotic porno film that could have just been, something you could have given a little bit less money to be made for, or to be made into, to be aired on something like After Hours on Showtime or Skinmax, But, yeah, this movie, at the end of the day, basically, like I said, almost caused Elizabeth Berkley's career to kind of go downward. And basically, not just professionally, but personally. But thank the Lord, she was able to bounce back, get the help she needed, as well as realize, hey, I'm either going to embrace this, or I'm going to basically bury it. And I think over time she tried to bury it, but then she embraced it when she realized, there's no getting away from it. There's no getting away from it, and she started seeing basically the fan following that the film was getting, because it was being discovered by new generations of fans who had discovered Saved by the Bell as well, and wanted to see what other projects the actors of that show were a part of. They wanted to see. I mean, you take a look at, let's say, Mark Parr Gosling, who played Zach. He became a big, well, not a big name, but he basically got a decent shot on the small screen and the big screen with Dead Man on Campus, which I saw and I thought was great, as well as he got a shot on NYPD Blue. And now was part of the new version, the new rebooted version, or soft rebooted version of Saved by the Bell for the modern generation. So he had he had some decent success. Tiffany Amber Thiessen, she went on to be part of, I think, Beverly Hills 90210, as well as some other projects, so she was all right. And what's her name? Laura Larks, or whatever, Lisa. I can't think of her name, but basically the actress that played Lisa, she's done decently, outside of acting. I mean, she's come back and acted, especially, like I said, with the new Saved by the Bell. But she's also done stuff outside of it, which which has been pretty successful. Which has been pretty successful for her. And Elizabeth basically is one of those stories to where, just when you think the career might be over, God points her in another direction, whether she admits that or not, and basically takes her and lifts her up with the right people and points her in the direction she needs to go in. And now she's basically back to what she was. Basically back to being, an actress that takes on roles that fit who she is. I mean, when you look at the new Saved by the Bell series on Peacock, she slipped right back into Jesse. She slipped right back into being Jesse like it was nobody's business. You know, in any other show that she's been part of, either as the leading role or co-leading role, she's actually done good in. She really has. And again though, this movie basically, when it first came out, was basically, at the end of the day, some would say nearly a death sentence, not just for her, but for some people associated, or not some people, but with those associated, the actors and the actresses, and even the crew members, the producers, the directors, the screenwriters. Everybody was getting pretty much criticized, in a very controversial way because of what they had created, and all that. And what was interesting about it when it came to Elizabeth's character is, people knew she was from Saved by the Bell, but for those that were getting into Saved by the Bell by the time Showgirls was coming out, they had to do literally a double take when they saw who was starring in this NC-17 movie, NC-17 movie. They had to do a double take when they saw who the feature star, the main star, was going to be, because they're like, wait a minute, this is the same actress who's Jessie on Saved by the Bell. What the hey? It's like they can't believe what they're seeing. And if that didn't make them do a double take, the ending to the Saved by the Bell movie finale, the Saved by the Bell movie finale, Wedding in Las Vegas, pretty much made them do a double take when she, at the last moment, shows up at the wedding as a bridesmaid or a co-maid of honor, if you will, for Kelly. She shows up and everything, and people watching that movie again have to do a double take. Like, wait a minute, that's the same girl that's in Showgirls. What the hey? Like, they can't believe what they're seeing. They can't believe what they're seeing. But then they kind of understand, like, oh, we get it now. She probably wanted to move on and try other things. And obviously, looking back on it, they're realizing, yeah, this was just what she felt like maybe this was her step into the movie, the movie world, but it was basically the wrong step that she, Kyle, and others took. But again, like I said, ever since then, the movie has taken on a cult status. It has taken on a cult status that basically, has made people embrace the film, not just for its cringiness and its raunchiness, but for the fact that it even got made. For the fact that it even got the publicity that it did. So, at the end of the day, as crazy as this sounds, things turned out all right. For Elizabeth, for Elizabeth's career and her connection to Showgirls. It really did. And if you want to know the impact that this movie had and the cult following it started to get, you have to look no further. Well, actually, you do have to look a little further, about 12 years. But basically, 18 years after the first movie came out, they did a sequel called Showgirls 2, Pennies from Heaven, which was basically a different kind of story, but it had certain scenes in there, like a pool scene that played homage to that pool scene from the first film, but the difference is it was a LGBTQ lesbian scene, if you will. That's what it was. It was an LGBTQ lesbian version, and not as raunchy or erotic as the last one, but it was close. It was close. I'll put it that way, from what I understood. And again, that shows you the impact. It shows you the cult status that the film started to gain. That basically they had to wait nearly 20 years to do a sequel when there was no plans to do a sequel. I mean, the movie didn't do well at the box office, and like I mentioned earlier, it did all the things that I said it did. Professionally and personally to Elizabeth, and professionally and somewhat personally to the other people involved. So it took nearly 20 years to wipe the stench off, and get folks that, basically were like me, teenagers at that time, that grew up, to embrace the film in a cult status, to see the film for more than just, a big budgeted erotic porno film, and see it mainly for the story it was trying to tell, that it's gained that cult status. And once that started to happen, all of a sudden you have the same studio or a different studio decide, hey, let's do a sequel, and they hire a screenwriter to make the script a reality, and the rest is history. The rest is history. But it is so crazy to think that 30 years later, people are still talking about this film, but they're now talking about it in a positive light. And that basically, this is a film 30 years later to where you take lessons from it. You take lessons from it, and those lessons are that if you're going to sign up for a film like this that might even have a big budget, if you will, that basically what you need to do is make sure that what you're signing up for is going to pay off in the end. That the script you're going to be reading is going to be something that's going to hopefully open doors for you and break down barriers and not be the reverse. So yeah, it's hard to believe that 30 years later, people are now, I wouldn't say celebrating the film, but they've been embracing it in a cult status like situation to where anytime it comes on to streaming, if you will, or comes on to, let's say, HBO, comes on to Cinemax, comes on to Showtime, what have you, basically uncut as well, people will actually tune in and watch it. They will tune in and watch it. But yeah, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years. Because again, I remember when they were advertising this back in '95. I was in not '95. In fact, I think they were advertising this. Yeah, they were advertising this mostly in '95. But the earliest I heard about it was at the end of '94. That's how far back they were advertising this film because they wanted it to be a big deal, even if it was going to be nothing more than a big budgeted erotic porno film. But it was supposed to basically in a cringe. I don't think they expected it to be cringe or be cringy the way it was, but basically it was supposed to depict life, as a showgirl, even if it was embellished, even if it was an embellished fictional take on the life of a showgirl and the competitions and all that, the rivals and all that, even though it was very embellished fiction, a very fictionally embellished take, you know, basically they wanted to promote this as being hopefully being a big budget blockbuster, and it became anything but. It became anything but. But however, though, again, 30 years later, it's gained a cult following in a very positive way. And a lot of the people involved have salvaged their careers, bounced back, thanks to the Lord above, in my belief. Thanks to the Lord above, they have bounced back, and now they're better off, better off than they ever were before. And they embrace the showgirl situation with open arms. They don't look back on it. They don't look back on it. In a negative way. They look back on it in a positive way, and that's what you need to do sometimes. You need to look back at stuff in a very positive manner. So anyway, I just wanted to come on here and talk about that because I don't think anybody else has talked about it. But let me know what your thoughts are. What were your thoughts when you first found out that Showgirls was going to, happen, and it was going to star Jessie Spano, Elizabeth Berkley of all people? Let me know what your thoughts were. How did you feel about that? How did you feel seeing that and being like, "Oh, this is interesting. This is this is interesting." Jessie Spano, Saved by the Bell, is going to be doing this. Oh, let me check it out. What were your thoughts? How did you feel about it? And do you think maybe, over time, it gaining this cult status, is what led to certain people at maybe the same studio or a different studio deciding to do a sequel, even though it was almost 20 years later? Now, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comment section as well as in the live chat during the premiere. And so guys, with that saying, do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notification, subscribe to the channel, share the video. Also, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as click on the top link to go to my new Fourth Wall store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. I have one item up right now, but I think you'll enjoy it, and there will be more to come later. And also, click on the bottom link to go to the OG Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are on what I had to say here. Can you believe it's been 30 years since this movie came out? And let me know what your thoughts of it were when you first saw it. What were your thoughts on, of all people, Elizabeth Berkley, Jessie Spano being in the film? How did you feel about that? Do you think it was nothing more Or do you think people will write back in that time frame that it was nothing more than a big budgeted erotic porno film? Let me know. Love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, I am out.